The sun hung high and unforgiving over Oakwood Estates, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and pristine driveways. This was a neighborhood where order was revered, where the hum of electric trimmers often served as morning alarms, and where the homeowners association wielded power like a gavel at auction. I was a recent transplant from the city, seeking solace in this suburban haven, craving peace more than I craved caffeine on an early morning. My corner lot was modest but lush, a jewel in the crown of conformity that was Oakwood. My pool sparkled like a sapphire under the sun, a sanctuary of quiet reflection, until Karen. Karen, queen of the HOA, she of the pixie cut and ironclad clipboard, a harbinger of unsolicited advice and thinly veiled threats of compliance. Her eyes were hawk-like, always scanning, always judging, a woman whose life was a ledger, every line meticulously balanced, every infraction noted. Her first move was subtle. A letter slipped under my door with the precision of a surgeon. "Your trash cans are visible from the street." It read, drenched in passive aggression. I moved them, hoping to avoid conflict, a gentle wave in the stormy sea of suburban politics. Weeks trickled by, each one marked by Karen's increasingly audacious attempts to maintain order, each petty act, a drop in a growing reservoir of my patience. The gnome on my porch was deemed garish, the color of my mailbox unconventional to Karen. My very existence seemed a rebellion against the HOA's sacred creed. But I remained unflappable a rock against the tides of her discontent. Her notes became more frequent, her criticisms more personal, and then the soap. It was a sunny Saturday when I found my pool transformed into a foamy disaster. Suds spilled over the edges like a child's bubble bath gone awry. Creeping across the lawn with slow, determined intent, I stood in disbelief, a silent witness to Karen's masterpiece of mischief. There was a certain irony to it all. Soap, the agent of cleanliness, unleashed in an act of pure pettiness, my sanctuary now a caricature of itself, bubbles popping indifferently in the breeze. But in the chaos, there was calm. I watched the Suds, seeing in them an opportunity. Karen had drawn her line in the sand. I would answer, not with anger, but with inevitability, a quiet storm brewing beneath a placid exterior. The Suds danced across my lawn, creeping ever closer to the boundary between my world and Karen's. I smiled, a plan unfurling in my mind, as silent as the bubbles that floated skyward. Let the Suds spread. I thought, let them find their path. And so, my response began to form, not in haste or malice, but with the slow certainty of nature reclaiming its space. The war had started, but I would not be the aggressor. I would be the tide, rising slowly, inexorably, ready to envelop all in my serene embrace. With the sun tilted high above, casting its unforgiving glare over the neighborhood, my backyard glistened with remnants of Karen's mischief. A frothy spectacle of bubbles had long since dried, but in the soft echoes of wind chimes and the gentle rustle of leaves, I felt the lingering whispers of her audacity. Karen had always been a creature of habit, predictable in her unpredictable ways. She orchestrated chaos with the precision of a maestro, her baton being the absurdity of HOA regulations. It began with letters. Thinly veiled threats slipped under my door, each one a proclamation of my supposed transgressions grasped too long. Curb not swept, garden gnome violation, petty infractions dressed as grave offenses. I could almost hear her guffaw, a sharp sound like nails on a chalkboard, as she awaited my compliance. But I knew better than to dance to her tune. She underestimated the quiet strength of patience and the power of calculated resolve. I watched, my gaze steady, as Karen paraded through the neighborhood, her presence an omniscient cloud. She wielded gossip as a weapon, a masterful conductor of neighborhood whispers, from one house to the next. She spun tales, weaving my name into the fabric of scandal. I became the antagonist in her narratives, a villain painted in shades of imagined defiance. Yet, the irony lay in her ignorance. She never realized that whispers had an echo, often returning to the origin with twice the force. Days turned into a week, and the morning sunlight spilled through my window, a golden syrup casting warmth over the cool wood floors. In the quiet sanctuary of my home, I formulated a plan, not of retribution, but of consequence. For every action, there is a reaction, a universal truth, as immutable as the tides. Her lawn, a shrine to manicured perfection, stood as her pride and joy. It flourished under her obsessive care, blades of grass standing in rigid salute. I considered the irony of her vigil over nature's chaos, her desperate attempt to impose order. It was a delicate balance, serenity perched precariously on the edge of disorder. With the precision of a chess player, I made my move, a gentle release of the suds, a whisper of what had once plagued my pool, now set free upon her lawn. It wasn't revenge. It was a mirror, a reflection of her own deeds, now repurposed as a lesson. The bubbles danced across the green, a symphony of soap, sunlight, and irony. In the aftermath, as Suds transformed into a blanket of white upon her prized grass, I stood back, observing the unfolding drama. I wondered if Karen would see the parallels, recognize the rhymes in the chaos she once orchestrated. Perhaps she would pause, her reign of tyranny halted by the quiet power of reflection. The neighborhood watched, eyes wide with curiosity, as Karen emerged, her face a canvas of disbelief and indignation. A single line escaped her lips, more a whisper than a cry. How could this happen? It lingered in the air, a rhetorical question devoid of introspection. I turned away, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Sometimes the universe doesn't need us to fight. It just needs us to hold the mirror steady. Let the perpetrators bear witness to their own folly. The suds glistened in the sun, a temporary testament to balance restored, and I felt the quiet satisfaction of a storm weathered with grace. The sun was a lazy disk hanging low over our suburban kingdom when I finally took inventory of the damage. My pool, once a pristine blue oasis, was now a foamy monstrosity, a sudsy testament to Karen's latest antics. The bubbles shimmered mockingly in the warm light, their presence a stark reminder of her relentless campaign. Across the street, her meticulously manicured lawn lay in deceptive tranquility, as if untouched by the chaos she sowed elsewhere. I had expected something the way her eyes narrowed at my every action, assessing, calculating. Karen, with her clipboard clutched like a scepter, ruled our neighborhood with the fervor of a queen guarding her realm. I was her favorite target, the neighbor with the audacity to paint my door an unsanctioned shade of blue. For Karen, it was an unforgivable sin. But this time, her joke had gone too far. It was time to respond, not with a roar, but with a whisper, the kind that echoes. I documented everything meticulously, the trail of suds creeping across my yard like a mischievous ghost, the way the bubbles clung to the blades of grass, refusing to let go. Each photograph captured her handiwork, the evidence building like a crescendo in a symphony of retribution. I could have taken it to the board, armed myself with regulations and bylaws, but there was something more satisfying about a plan that simmered quietly beneath the surface. My counter was subtle, a whisper in the wind, a gentle nudge to nature's balance. The night was silent when I set my plan in motion, the stars keeping secrets as I worked. I wanted her to feel the chaos, to see the ripple of her actions in her own perfectly ordered world. Dawn broke with a cool breeze, sweeping through the neighborhood, carrying with it the scent of wet grass and the promise of another blazing day. Karen's lawn was immaculate, each blade a soldier standing to attention. She would have marveled at its perfection, if not for the creeping tide of bubbles that began their dance with the morning dew. From my porch, I watched as the Suds, released from their watery prison, drifted over to her domain. It was a slow spectacle, a leisurely invasion. The bubbles caught the light, casting tiny rainbows on her emerald canvas, a playful mockery of her pristine order. The irony was delicious, the way nature embraced her precious lawn with the very chaos she had unleashed. She emerged, predictably, her eyes wide with disbelief, taking in the frothy revolution. Her composed facade cracked, just a little, as she waded into the foamy sea, trying to restore order with frantic gestures. I sipped my coffee, savoring the scene, the quiet power of my silent rebellion. Our eyes met across the street, and for a moment, the world held its breath. Her gaze was a storm of outrage and confusion, mine a calm tide. There was no need for words. The lesson unfurled itself in the morning air. Karen had thought it funny to fill my pool with soap. Now, she stood amidst her own creation, nature's revenge on a silver platter. Her clipboard lay forgotten on the ground, a casualty in our unspoken war. A soft chuckle escaped my lips, drowned by the chorus of lawnmowers and chirping birds. It was a small victory, but in the kingdom of neighborhood squabbles, it was a triumph nonetheless. Calm had settled over the neighborhood, or so it seemed. The air was thick with the kind of silence that follows an uproar, deceptive calm, as if nature itself held its breath, waiting for the next act. My morning routine had resumed, a comforting rhythm of coffee sips and newspaper rustle, though my mind was elsewhere, plotting a course through a labyrinth of legal recourse. Karen's stunt with the soap had left its mark. Quite literally, suds had dripped and dried into abstract patterns on the pool deck, a surreal reminder of her audacity, but I felt no urge to scrub them away. They were evidence now, solid as a contract, a testament to her folly. I had quietly reached out to the Homeowners Association president, a man well-versed in the delicate dance of neighborhood politics. He had a penchant for order, his garden precision trimmed, each blade of grass standing to attention like soldiers on parade. When I'd shown him the photos, his lips had curled into a thin line, the kind of expression one makes when tasting something bitter. The law can be slow, but it is relentless, like a stream carving through rock. It moves steadily, reshaping the landscape. I drew comfort from this as I sat in the conference room. The legal papers spread before me like a strategic map. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman with a mind like a scalpel, dissected the situation with cool efficiency. We discussed nuisance laws, property damage, and the HOA's covenants, each clause a stepping stone across the murky waters of conflict. Meanwhile, Karen had retreated into her fortress of curated hedges, her laughter silenced. Occasionally, I would see her peering from behind her pristine curtains, a specter in her own domain. The irony was not lost on me. The queen of control, now trapped in a castle of her own making. The sun had barely begun to dip below the horizon when I returned home to find an envelope stuck in my mailbox. The HOA's logo embossed on its surface. Inside lay the formal complaint, a carefully crafted document that outlined the repercussions of her actions. It was a small victory, a measured step forward in a game that required patience and precision. On the surface, nothing had changed. The neighborhood rolled on as it always had, a tranquil facade, each day a mirror of the last. But beneath, the currents shifted. There is power in subtlety, in the quiet force of a well-laid plan. Karen had underestimated me. She had laughed at chaos, believing herself untouchable. But the wheels of justice turn, and they grind slowly but exceedingly fine. The soap bubbles might have vanished, but their legacy lingered, an invisible tide turning against her. As night descended, I sat by the pool, its surface now serene, undisturbed by the ghost of foam. The moon cast its reflection, a silver coin tossed into a well of dreams. I watched the water ripple slightly in the breeze, a gentle reminder of what had transpired. And what was yet to come. The power of quiet retribution is not in the noise it makes, but in the silence it leaves behind. The morning sun crested over Oakwood Heights, spilling its light across the patchwork of well-manicured lawns. It was a day like any other in this quiet neighborhood except for the carpet of suds covering Karen's lawn, glistening like a sea of misguided dreams. Retribution had a way of balancing scales, and here it unfolded with poetic justice. Karen's lawn, once the pride of Oakwood, now resembled a bubble bath gone rogue. The irony was not lost on me as I stood at my window, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Good neighbors make good fences." The suds were relentless, cascading down her meticulously planted flower beds, turning her prized roses into fluffy mounds. I had anticipated her reaction, half expecting a storm of indignation, but the silence was deafening. Perhaps she too marveled at the absurdity of the scene, a puppet of her own hubris. The community buzzed with whispered excitement. I could almost hear the hushed exchanges between the Prices next door, their blinds twitching like curious eyes. Even the wind carried a hint of laughter, rustling the leaves with a conspiratorial murmur. As the day wore on, the sun bore down, slowly dissolving the sudsy spectacle into nothing more than a memory that would haunt Karen, a living epitaph to her overzealous reign as the self-appointed arbiter of neighborhood propriety. I felt no urge to gloat, yet a quiet satisfaction settled in my chest, not from the act itself, but from the restoration of balance, a gentle reminder that power, misused, diminishes itself. Karen's silent defeat echoed through the neighborhood, a lesson in humility disguised as whimsy. Later, as evening shadows began their dance, I wandered down to the street. The air was cool, filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and distant barbecues. The peace was tangible, the kind that settled after a storm, leaving the sky clearer than before. In the days that followed, Karen retreated into herself. Her presence, once so dominant, faded like a watercolor left in the rain. The community subtly adjusted, the equilibrium restored. We resumed our lives, the incident fading into the tapestry of neighborhood lore. I never apologized, nor did she ever confront me. No words needed to be exchanged. Sometimes silence speaks the loudest truths. Life moved forward, carrying with it the quiet promise of second chances and new beginnings. Standing at my pool's edge, I watched the water ripple under the evening light, grateful for its clarity. In its depths, I saw reflections of the world, distorted yet honest, chaotic yet serene. There, in the shimmering reflection, was the essence of our little community, imperfect, resilient, and finally, at peace.